Have you ever noticed how some people seem to walk through life completely untouchable? They don't get pulled into drama. They don't attract energy vampires. They don't find themselves constantly explaining their choices or defending their boundaries. Meanwhile, the rest of us are out here feeling like magnets for every toxic person within a 50-mile radius, wondering why we always end up in the same exhausting patterns. It's like they're operating on a completely different frequency. Someone tries to manipulate them, and they just don't bite. A coworker attempts to drag them into office politics, and they somehow stay neutral. A family member pushes their buttons, and those buttons just don't seem to exist anymore. They're not rude about it. They're not building walls or cutting people off left and right. They're just naturally repellent to the kind of people who feed off chaos and drama. Here's what's wild about this. It's not because they're tougher or more confrontational. It's not because they've mastered some complex boundary-setting technique or learned to be ruthless. It's actually the opposite. They've figured out something much simpler and much more profound. They've learned how to become psychologically unavailable to toxic people without even trying. Most people think the solution to toxic relationships is learning how to fight back, how to set firmer boundaries, how to be more assertive. But that's actually backwards. When you're constantly having to defend yourself, you're still playing their game. You're still giving them exactly what they want, which is your emotional energy. You're still reacting, which means you're still controllable. The people who seem immune to toxicity have discovered something different. They've learned that toxic people are like emotional predators who can smell psychological wounds from miles away. They're attracted to unhealed parts of you, the places where you're still seeking validation, still trying to prove yourself, still carrying old pain that makes you vulnerable to their games. But when you heal those wounds, when you integrate those broken pieces, when you become whole within yourself, something shifts. You stop emitting the signals that attract toxic people in the first place. It's like you become invisible to them, not because you're hiding, but because you no longer have the emotional gaps they need to exploit. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about becoming so solid in who you are that manipulation just bounces off you. It's about reaching a place where you don't need anyone's approval to feel okay about yourself, where you don't need to be right in every argument, where you don't need to fix everyone's problems or manage everyone's emotions. The secret isn't learning how to deal with toxic people. The secret is becoming the kind of person toxic people instinctively avoid. And this transformation happens from the inside out, not from the outside in. See, toxic people are like skilled hunters. They can sense insecurity, people-pleasing tendencies, unresolved trauma, and emotional neediness. They know exactly which buttons to push because those buttons are still sensitive. They know how to make you doubt yourself because part of you is already doubting. They know how to make you feel guilty because you're already carrying guilt. But what happens when those buttons no longer exist? What happens when you're no longer seeking external validation? What happens when you're not afraid of disappointing people or being misunderstood? What happens when you're completely comfortable with who you are, including the parts you used to hide? You become boring to toxic people. You become useless to them. There's nothing for them to exploit, nothing for them to feed off of. They lose interest and move on to easier targets. Not because you fought them off, but because you no longer provide what they're looking for. This is what psychological integrity looks like. It's not about being perfect or having your life completely figured out. It's about being whole, being authentic, being comfortable in your own skin, regardless of what anyone else thinks or says. Most people spend their entire lives trying to manage other people's opinions of them. They contort themselves into shapes they think will be more acceptable, more lovable, more worthy of respect. But this constant shape-shifting is exactly what makes them vulnerable to manipulation. When you're always trying to be what others want you to be, you give them power over you. The moment you stop caring about being liked by everyone, something miraculous happens. You start attracting people who actually like you for who you are. You stop wasting energy on relationships that drain you. You stop getting pulled into drama that has nothing to do with you. But here's the thing, most people don't understand. This transformation requires you to face the parts of yourself you've been running from. It requires you to look at why you need so much validation, why you're so afraid of conflict, why you feel responsible for everyone else's emotions. Often, these patterns go back to childhood. Maybe you learned that love was conditional, that you had to be perfect to be worthy of affection. Maybe you learned that your job was to keep everyone happy, to avoid conflict at all costs. Maybe you learned that your feelings didn't matter as much as everyone else's. These early lessons create vulnerabilities that toxic people can exploit decades later. They know how to make you feel like that scared child again, desperate for approval, terrified of abandonment, willing to sacrifice your own needs to keep the peace. But when you heal those old wounds, when you give yourself the love and acceptance you've been seeking from others, everything changes. You stop being that scared child. You become an adult who knows their worth, who trusts their instincts, who doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. This isn't about becoming selfish or uncaring. It's about becoming so secure in yourself that you can actually love others more freely because you're not trying to get something from them. You're not looking for them to fill holes in your psyche. You're not using relationships to avoid dealing with your own issues. When you're whole, you attract other whole people. When you're authentic, you attract people who appreciate authenticity. When you're secure, you attract people who value security. It's like you start operating on a completely different frequency, one that toxic people can't even detect. The process of becoming psychologically unavailable to toxic people isn't about building walls or becoming defensive. It's about becoming so solid in your own identity that there's nothing for them to grip onto. It's about being so comfortable with yourself that their attempts at manipulation feel foreign and obvious. Think about it this way. If someone tried to make you feel bad about your eye color, you probably wouldn't take it seriously because you're completely neutral about that aspect of yourself. You're not seeking validation about your eye color, so any criticism about it would just bounce off. This is what it feels like when you're truly secure in who you are. Criticism, manipulation, and toxic behavior just bounce off because you're not looking for validation in those areas. You know who you are, you're comfortable with who you are, and no one else's opinion can shake that foundation. But most people have areas where they're still seeking validation, still trying to prove themselves, still carrying shame or insecurity. These are the areas where toxic people can gain entry. They know how to find these soft spots and exploit them. The journey to becoming psychologically unavailable to toxic people is really a journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance. It's about identifying where you're still vulnerable, where you're still seeking external validation, where you're still carrying old wounds that make you easy to manipulate. This work isn't always comfortable. It requires you to look at patterns you might have been avoiding, to face truths about yourself you might not want to see. But it's the only way to true freedom. It's the only way to stop attracting the same types of toxic people over and over again. When you do this work, when you become whole and secure within yourself, you don't just repel toxic people. You also become a magnet for healthy, authentic relationships. You start attracting people who appreciate your genuine self, who respect your boundaries, who add value to your life instead of draining it. The transformation isn't instant, but it's profound. You'll notice that drama seems to follow you less. You'll find yourself naturally avoiding situations and people that used to pull you in. You'll discover that you have more energy because you're not constantly managing other people's emotions or defending yourself against manipulation. Most importantly, you'll experience a kind of peace that comes from being truly comfortable with who you are. You won't need anyone's approval to feel good about yourself. You won't need to be right in every argument. You won't need to fix everyone's problems or rescue everyone from their own choices. This is what it means to be psychologically unavailable to toxic people. It's not about being cold or disconnected. It's about being so secure in yourself that manipulation becomes impossible. It's about being so whole that you don't have the emotional gaps that toxic people need to exploit. Now that you've begun to grasp the profound mechanics of how certain people become untouchable to toxic individuals, let's explore what actually happens when you embody this energy. Because understanding the theory is one thing, but experiencing the transformation is something entirely different. When you develop this inner wholeness, this psychological completeness that Jung described, you don't just repel toxic people. You fundamentally alter your entire reality. The world begins to respond to you differently, not because you've become aggressive or confrontational, but because you've become authentically solid. Think about it this way. When you're no longer seeking validation from others, when you're not desperately trying to prove your worth or defend your position, you move through life with a different frequency. It's subtle but unmistakable. People can sense it the moment you walk into a room. You stop explaining yourself to those who weren't meant to understand you. You stop over-apologizing for taking up space. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. And in that space, in that refusal to compromise your essence, something powerful emerges. Toxic people, remember, are emotional predators. They hunt for weakness, for insecurity, for the small cracks in your armor where they can insert their influence. But when there are no cracks, when you've integrated those shadow aspects of yourself that you once tried to hide, they literally cannot find a way in. It's like trying to grip a perfectly smooth stone. There's nowhere for their manipulation to take hold. Your responses become measured, calm, almost boringly consistent. You don't react to their provocations because you've already faced those parts of yourself that they're trying to trigger. This doesn't mean you become emotionless or cold. Quite the opposite. You become more genuinely emotional, more authentic in your responses. But your emotions are no longer at the mercy of other people's psychological games. You feel deeply, but you respond consciously. The transformation extends beyond just avoiding toxic relationships. When you're no longer broadcasting vulnerability, when you're no longer unconsciously seeking someone to fill the empty spaces within you, you begin attracting entirely different types of people. Healthy individuals, people who have done their own inner work, are drawn to this energy. They recognize it because they've cultivated it themselves. Your relationships become deeper, more meaningful, built on mutual respect rather than need or dependency. You start to notice that drama simply doesn't follow you anymore. Those exhausting conversations where you're constantly defending your reality, those situations where you feel like you're going crazy because someone is twisting your words, those moments where you question your own sanity because of someone else's manipulation, they just stop happening. It's not that you've become perfect or that you never encounter difficult people. It's that you've become impervious to their particular brand of toxicity. You see it for what it is, a reflection of their own unhealed wounds, and you respond with clarity rather than reactivity. Your energy becomes precious to you. You stop wasting it on people who drain you, on situations that lead nowhere, on conversations that spiral into chaos. You begin to invest your emotional resources in relationships and experiences that actually nourish you. This shift creates a ripple effect in every area of your life. At work, you stop getting pulled into office politics. In your family, you stop being the one who always has to keep the peace. In your social circles, you stop being the dumping ground for everyone else's emotional baggage. People begin to treat you with more respect, not because you've demanded it, but because you've embodied it. You've shown them, through your presence and your responses, that you value yourself. And when you value yourself genuinely, others begin to value you as well. The most beautiful part of this transformation is that it's not about building walls or becoming isolated. It's about becoming so comfortable with who you are that you can be completely open and vulnerable with the right people while remaining completely protected from those who would exploit that vulnerability. You develop an intuitive sense of who is safe and who isn't, not through paranoia or suspicion, but through a deep knowing that comes from having integrated all aspects of yourself. You can sense authenticity in others because you found it in yourself. This is the secret that Jung discovered and that so few people understand. The path to freedom from toxic relationships isn't about learning to fight or defend yourself. It's about becoming so whole, so integrated, so comfortable with your own darkness and light that you become invisible to those who prey on fragmentation. When you reach this place, you'll find that life becomes simpler, relationships become healthier, and you finally have the energy to invest in what truly matters. You'll wonder how you ever lived any other way, and you'll never willingly return to the old patterns that once made you a target. This is your invitation to begin that journey, to stop running from your shadow and start embracing it, to stop seeking completion in others and start finding it within yourself. Because on the other side of this work lies not just freedom from toxicity, but freedom to be authentically, unapologetically yourself.